Penalties for false accusation, false evidence, and wrong legal decisions. 1. If a man bring an accusation against a man, and charge him with a capital crime, but cannot prove it, he, the accuser, shall be put to death. 2. If a man charge a man with sorcery, and cannot prove it, he who is charged with sorcery shall go to the river, into the river he shall throw himself, and if the river overcome him, his accuser shall take to himself his house, estate. If the river show that man to be innocent, and he come forth unharmed, he who charged him with sorcery shall be put to death. He who threw himself into the river shall take to himself the house of his accuser. 3. If a man, in a case, bending judgment, bear false witness, or do not establish the testimony that he has given, if that case be a case involving life, that man shall be put to death. 4. If a man, in a case, bear witness for grain or money, as a bribe, he shall himself bear the penalty imposed in that case. 5. If a judge pronounce a judgment, render a decision, deliver a verdict duly signed and sealed, and afterward alter his judgment, they shall call that judge to account for the alteration of the judgment which he had pronounced, and he shall pay 12-fold the penalty which was in said judgment, and, in the assembly, they shall expel him from his seat of judgment, and he shall not return, and with the judges in a case he shall not take his seat. 6. If a man steal the property of a god, temple, or palace, that man shall be put to death, and he who receives from his hand the stolen property, shall also be put to death. 7. If a man purchase silver or gold, manservant or maidservant, ox, sheep, or ass, or anything else from a man's son, or from a man's servant without witnesses or contracts, or if he receive the same in trust, that man shall be put to death, as a thief. 8. If a man steal ox or sheep, ass or pig, or boat, if it be from a god, temple, or a palace, he shall restore 30-fold. If it be from a freeman, he shall render 10-fold. If the thief have nothing wherewith to pay, he shall be put to death. 9. If a man who has lost anything find that which was lost in the possession of another man, and the man in whose possession the lost property is found say, "It was sold to me, I purchased it in the presence of witnesses," and the owner of the lost property say, "I will bring witnesses to identify my lost property," if the purchaser produce the seller who has sold it to him and the witnesses in whose presence he purchased it, and the owner of the lost property produce witnesses to identify his lost property, the judges shall consider their evidence. The witnesses in whose presence the purchase was made, and the witnesses to identify the lost property shall give their testimony in the presence of the god. The seller shall be put to death as a thief. The owner of the lost property shall recover his loss. The purchaser shall recover from the estate of the seller the money which he paid out. 10. If the purchaser do not produce the seller who sold it to him and the witnesses in whose presence he purchased it, and, if the owner of the lost property produce witnesses to identify his lost property, the purchaser shall be put to death, as a thief. The owner of the lost property shall recover his loss. 11. If the owner, claimant, of the lost property do not produce witnesses to identify his lost property, he has attempted fraud, has lied, he has stirred up strife, calumny, he shall be put to death. 12. If the seller has gone to his fate, that is have died, the purchaser shall recover damages in said case 5-fold from the estate of the seller. 13. If the witnesses of that man be not at hand, the judges shall declare a postponement for 6 months, and if he do not bring in his witnesses within the 6 months, that man has attempted fraud, he shall himself bear the penalty imposed in that case. 14. If a man steal a man's son, who is a minor, he shall be put to death. 15. If a man aid a male or female slave of the palace, or a male or female slave of a freeman, to escape from the city gate, he shall be put to death. 16. If a man harbor in his house a male or female slave who has fled from the palace or from a freeman, and do not bring him, the slave, forth at the call of the commandant, the owner of that house, shall be put to death. 17. If a man sees a male or female slave, a fugitive, in the field, and bring that slave back to his owner, the owner of the slave shall pay him 2 shekels of silver. 18. If that slave will not name his owner, he shall bring him to the palace, and they shall inquire into his antecedents, and they shall return him to his owner. 19. If he detain that slave in his house, and later the slave be found in his possession, that man shall be put to death. 20. If the slave escape from the hand of his captor, that man shall so declare, in the name of the God, to the owner of the slave, and shall go free. 21. If a man make a breach in a house, they shall put him to death in front of that breach, and they shall thrust him therein. 22. If a man practice brigandage, and be captured, that man shall be put to death. 23. If the brigand be not captured, the man who has been robbed shall, in the presence of the God, make an itemized statement of his loss, and the city and the governor, in whose province and jurisdiction the robbery was committed, shall compensate him for whatever was lost. 24. If it be a life that is lost, the city and governor shall pay 1 mana of silver to his people. 25. If a fire break out in a man's house, and a man who goes to extinguish it, cast his eye on the property of the owner of the house and take the property of the owner of the house, that man shall be thrown into that fire. 26. If either an officer or a constable, who is ordered to go on an errand of the king, do not go, but hire a substitute, and dispatch him in his stead, that officer or constable shall be put to death.
Oh my God.
His hired substitute shall take to himself the officer's house. 27. If an officer or a constable, who in a garrison of the king, be captured, and afterward they give his field and garden to another, and he conduct his business. If the former return and arrive in his city, they shall restore to him his field and garden, and he himself shall conduct his business. 28. If an officer or a constable, who is in a fortress of the king, be captured, and his son be able to conduct the business, they shall give to him the field and garden, and he shall conduct the business of his father. 29. If his son be too young, and be not able to conduct the business of his father, they shall give 1/3 of the field and of the garden to his mother, and his mother shall rear him. 30. If an officer or a constable from the beginning of, or on account of, his business neglect his field, his garden, and his house, and leave them uncared for, and another after him take his field, his garden, and his house, and conduct his business for 3 years, so if the former return and desire, or would manage, his field, his garden, and his house, they shall not give them to him. He who has taken them, and conducted the business shall continue to do so. 31. If he leave them uncared for but 1 year and return, they shall give him his field, his garden, and his house, and he himself shall continue his business. 32. If a merchant ransom either an officer or a constable who has been captured on an errand of the king, and enable him to reach his city, if there be sufficient ransom in his house, he shall ransom himself. If there be not sufficient ransom in his house, in the temple of his city he shall be ransomed. If there be not sufficient ransom in the temple of his city, the palace shall ransom him. In no case shall his field or his garden or his house be given for his ransom. 33. If a governor or a magistrate take possession of the men of levy, or pardon a deserter, or accept and send a hired substitute on an errand of the king, that governor or magistrate shall be put to death. 34. If the governor or a magistrate take the property of an officer, plunder an officer, let an officer for hire, present an officer in a judgment to a man of influence, take the gift which the king has given to an officer, that governor or magistrate shall be put to death. 35. If a man buy from an officer the cattle or sheep which the king has given to that officer, he shall forfeit his money. 36. In no case shall one sell the field or garden or house of an officer, constable, or tax gatherer. 37. If a man purchase the field or garden or house of an officer, constable, or tax gatherer, his deed tablet shall be broken, cancelled, and he shall forfeit his money, and he shall return the field, garden, or house to its owner. 38. An officer, constable, or tax gatherer shall not make over to his wife or daughter the field, garden, or house, which is his business, that is, which is his by virtue of his office, nor shall he assign them for debt. 39. He may make over to his wife or daughter the field, garden, or house which he has purchased and, hence, possesses, or he may assign them for debt. 40. A woman, merchant, or other property holder may sell field, garden, or house. The purchaser shall conduct the business of the field, garden, or house which he has purchased. 41. If a man have bargained for the field, garden, or house of an officer, constable, or tax gatherer, and given sureties, the officer, constable, or tax gatherer shall return to his field, garden, or house, and he shall take to himself the sureties which were given to him. 42. If a man rent a field for cultivation and do not produce any grain in the field, they shall call him to account because he has not performed the work required in the field, and he shall give to the owner of the field grain on the basis of the adjacent fields. 43. If he do not cultivate the field and neglect it, he shall give to the owner of the field grain on the basis of the adjacent fields, and the field which he has neglected he shall break up with hoes, he shall harrow, and he shall return it to the owner of the field. 44. If a man rent an unreclaimed field for 3 years to develop it, and neglect it and do not develop the field, in the 4th year he shall break up the field with hoes, he shall hoe and harrow it, and he shall return it to the owner of the field, and shall measure out 10 gur of grain. Pagan. 45. If a man has given his field to a tenant for crop rent, and receive the crop rent of his field, and later Adad, I.e., the storm god, inundate the field and carry away the produce, the loss falls on the tenant. 46. If he have not received the rent of his field, and he have rented the field for either 1/2 or 1/3 of the crop, the tenant and the owner of the field shall divide the grain which is in the field according to agreement. 47. If the tenant give the cultivation of the field into the charge of an author because in a former year he has not gained a maintenance, the owner of the field shall not interfere. He would cultivate it, and his field has been cultivated, and at the time of harvest he shall take grain according to his contracts. 48. If a man owe a debt, and Adad inundate his field and carry away the produce, or through lack of water, grain have not grown in the field, in that year he shall not make any return of grain to the creditor, he shall alter his contract tablet, and he shall not pay the interest for that year. 49. If a man obtain money from a merchant, and give, as security, to the merchant a field to be planted with grain and sesame, and say to him, cultivate the field, and harvest and take to thyself the grain and sesame which is produced. If the tenant trays grain and sesame in the field, at the time of harvest the owner of the field shall receive the grain and sesame which is in the field, and he shall give to the merchant grain for the loan which he had obtained from him and for the interest and for the maintenance of the tenant. 50. If he give, as security, a field planted with grain, or a field planted with sesame, the owner of the field shall receive the grain or the sesame which is in the field, and he shall return the loan and its interest to the merchant. 51. If he have not the money to return, he shall give to the merchant grain or sesame, at their market value according to the scale fixed by the king, for the loan and its interest which he has obtained from the merchant. 52. If the tenant do not secure a crop of grain or sesame in his field, he shall not cancel his contract. 53. If a man neglect to strengthen his dike and do not strengthen it, and a break be made in his dike and the water carry away the farmland, the man in whose dike the break has been made shall restore the grain which he has caused to be lost. 54. If he be not able to restore the grain, they shall sell him and his goods, and the farmers whose grain the water has carried away shall share the results of the sale. 55. If a man open his canal for irrigation and neglect it, and the water carry away an adjacent field, he shall measure out grain on the basis of the adjacent fields. 56. If a man opened up the water, and the water carry away the improvements of an adjacent field, he shall measure out 10 gur of grain per gan. 57. If a shepherd have not come to an agreement with the owner of a field to pasture his sheep on the grass, and if he pasture his sheep on the field without the consent of the owner of the field shall harvest his field, and the shepherd who has pastured his sheep on the field without the consent of the owner of the field shall give over and above 20 gur of gan per gain to the owner of the field. 58. If, after the sheep have gone up from the meadow and have crowded their way out of the gate into the public common, the shepherd turn the sheep into the field and pasture the sheep on the field, the shepherd shall oversee the field on which he pastures, and at the time of harvest he shall measure out 60 gur of grain per gan to the owner of the field. 59. If a man cut down a tree in a man's orchard, without the consent of the owner of the orchard, he shall pay 1/2 mana of silver. 60. If a man give a field to a gardener to plant as an orchard, and the gardener plants the orchard and care for the orchard 4 years, in the 5th year the owner of the orchard and the gardener shall share equally, the owner of the orchard shall mark off his portion and take it. 61. If the gardener do not plant the whole field, but leave a space waste, they shall assign the waste space to his portion. 62. If he do not plant as an orchard the field which was given to him, if corn be the produce of the field, for the years during which it has been neglected the gardener shall measure out to the owner of the field such produce, on the basis of the adjacent fields, and he shall perform the required work on the field, and he shall restore it to the owner of the field. 63. If the field be unreclaimed, he shall perform the required work on the field and he shall restore it to the owner of the field, and he shall measure out 10 gur of grain per gan for each year. 64. If a man give his orchard to a gardener to manage, the gardener shall give to the owner of the orchard 2/3 of the produce of the orchard as long as he is in possession of the orchard, he himself shall take 1/3. 65. If the gardener do not properly manage the orchard, and he diminish the produce, the gardener shall measure out the produce of the orchard on the basis of the adjacent orchards.